Startups in London. I'm originally from New Zealand, and I've worked in a lot of small companies in New Zealand and in Australia, and now in London. So I've never worked in San Francisco, and I've never worked for one of these really big startups. What I'd like to talk to you today about is some of the smaller startups and some of the mistakes that I've made, and hopefully lessons learned, some experience that you could take home with you. So this start is it's not really for the experienced developers among you. I know that some of you have been working in startups for a long time. It's more for the young people getting started out in the startup fields, and hopefully give you a bit of experience of what I've gone through. So first of all, what is all the hype about this startup scene? Now in London, it's just getting started. In San Francisco, it's been going for a very long time. But recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a lot more startups opening up in London. There's a lot of hype about it and a lot of media attention, particularly like TechCrunch, is always talking about new acquisitions, who's just made a lot of money from equity, who's bought who, this sort of stuff. And it's a little bit overhyped, and I'm first to admit that, but I think that the cool thing about it, though, is it's attracting a new, young generation of JavaScript developers and new developers in general to the industry, and it's also allowing us to have the opportunity to build really cool new products and stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do in a more commercial and a larger scale organization. So how did it come about? In London in particular, it's traditionally been very, very difficult to get funding for your early stage startup. So in the past, you'd kind of go to family and friends, and you kind of try and get some money, or you go to the bank and you try and get a bit of money. But recently there's been an influx of venture capital investment in London. And so as a result, there's people looking to make these sort of high-risk, high-reward investments, kind of looking for the next Facebook or the next sort of the London of Twitter. This sort of stuff's happening. So as a result, there's a lot of small startups which are funded maybe 1 or 2 million just to see, kind of test the waters. So the cool thing is about startups is you get to use like a wide variety of technologies, and it's I always wonder when you're starting out for the first time in a brand new code base, what sort of technologies to use. And people ask me, is Node right for the job? Should I use PHP in this LAMP stack that we're all used to, or should we sort of test the waters with like some of the newer technologies that's available? Now, startups are the perfect place to use these sort of new technologies. For instance, like you've got Socket.io, you've got Elasticsearch, document stores, all this sort of stuff. This is the perfect place to try these technologies out, because if you using these new technologies, you can come up with new products. And really what people are looking for in a startup environment is a brand new product, something that's really innovative and really exciting. And there's also another reason why I like working in the industry, because I get to play with all these cool new toys. So having said that, working in a very small startup, and I'm talking like 5 to 10 people, can be very, very stressful, especially where money is concerned. But the reward is worth it. Long hours, late nights, all that sort of stuff. I've slept on the floor in the office over Christmas. I've worked on projects that have gone for 4 months and then they've just been canned. And it's stressful, but you also get great rewards from it. You meet amazing people. You get to experience new technologies and new things. You get to work with larger organizations, and so it's really good fun. The really important thing about startups, and it was mentioned earlier by Dustin, was that you need to really find your market. The really important thing I want to kind of give to you today is that it's not about scaling your architecture. It's not about being the most performant sort of product available. It's really about trying lots of small things, little modules, and testing them in the market to see what sticks. Once you find what sticks, that's the time when you should start working on it. And I think a lot of people get this wrong, actually. They tend to assume that they know what's right for the product and what their end users want, and they commit about 90% of their resources to going in that direction. I would actually advocate the opposite, which is just try 100 different things. Spend 1 or 2 days on each, and get them out there, play with the prototype, see what it feels like, and throw it away. And that way, you'll be able to find your market fit. You'll be able to figure out where your niche is in the market and where you can innovate. Okay, so I'll just talk quickly about how you can get started. This is for the younger people. If you want to get started in a startup, Selecting a company can be quite difficult because there's actually quite a lot to choose from now, which is good. So one way to go, obviously, is if you have friends that you know that you trust, to go and work with them. But otherwise, it's really important that you find people that are a lot smarter than you. And generally, you kind of tend away from people who are intimidating, or you think they're just, these rock stars of JavaScript. But it's important that you try and go and work with these people, because it's the best way that you learn new experiences and you learn new technologies. So I definitely recommend that you kind of try and punch above your weight and don't be intimidated by the class of the other people around you. I'd also say, when you're joining a company, you should be very aware of over-optimistic deadlines. I joined a company and we had 3 months to develop an iPhone, Android, and an HTML5 mobile app, which most of you know is pretty ambitious. So I'd say, just watch out what the scope of the product is. Have a look and see if you think it's unrealistic. It probably is unrealistic. Especially that was with like 4 guys, so it was pretty difficult. This is important. So own your domain, and what I mean here is like when you join a company and you're part of a small team that's like 4 people, like Ghost in the last slides. It's really important that you own a part of the company. You feel very involved with it. It's not like a larger company where you can kind of hide away in the background. We heard about Google. Maybe there's too many meetings or things like that, too much bureaucracy. You need to really get involved and take ownership of a part of the product. It's not really, if somebody else tells you that you need to do something and you don't believe in it, it's really important that you stand up for yourself and you stand up for what you believe in. And at the end of the day, if it comes down to it and you have to quit or you get fired, it's not such a big deal in this industry, It's more important that you stand up for what you believe in than you back down and just end up going down this path that I was talking about before, where you end up regretting what you did or making mistakes that were avoidable in the first place. This is absolutely killer to the startup environment, and we spent millions of pounds going down this sort of direction where we were following the founder's lead, and we just kind of did what we were told. And as a result, we went down a route that ended up not being the right way to go. We ended up having to pivot the product, and this is at a time when we just scaled up. We had about 4 or 5 coders, and we scaled up to 25 within about 2 months. And so this is just at the time when we were following this one direction, and nobody was kind of questioning, because everybody was just coming on board. Everybody was really hyped up. We were really excited about the way that the company was growing, and we thought we were kind of turning into a successful company. We had big office and everything like this, pool table. And we went down that direction too long, and we scaled too quickly as well, was one of the problems there. So I just really recommend that, if you really truly believe in something and you believe that something's going wrong, it's your responsibility, if you have equity or if you have any involvement with the company, to stand up and say that something's wrong and fight your corner, basically. So I'll talk a little bit about choosing the right tools. First of all, I'd like to talk about this concept of a solution space versus a problem space. And this is something that I see very commonly happening in engineering teams, is that, I'll give you an example. So if the business problem is, hey, we're having a problem with retention. The users are coming, they come once, and then they bounce. They don't come back to the site. We need a way of basically keeping these guys coming back, right? So you have a meeting, and you decide, hey, let's discuss this, and let's try and come up with a solution. Now, engineers instantly just want to get into the solution space, and they just want to start solving the problem. And what I'm advocating here is just taking a bit of a deep breath and stepping back and looking at the potential solutions. So in this example, like, what I see traditionally is people, you'll have a meeting, the engineering team and the product team. The product team's got this massive backlog. One of them it just says retention, like one word. And they talk to the team, they say, hey team, how are we going to solve this problem? And they discuss it for about an hour. And as a result, they come out with this idea. They say, oh look, what we're going to do is we're going to make an email newsletter. And we're going to send out emails to everybody, and this is going to solve the problem. And they go, okay, cool. So the engineering team goes off, and they start cutting up all the tickets, and they get into this sort of Scrum process, and they're working away. And if you go to any one of these team members at any point during the sprint and ask, what are you working on? And they say, oh, I'm working on this email feature. I'd say, okay. But actually what you're working on here is you're actually working on getting retention in the business. And it's so easy to forget that that's what you're working on. And inevitably what happens is that then people get stuck in this sort of, in the problem space, and then it's a problem of like, oh, now it doesn't work on mobile, and now it's not multilingual. And this one sprint turns into 4 sprints, and it turns into 6 sprints, and eventually you just totally lost track of what you're actually trying to do in the first place. And maybe what you could have done is you could have solved, or you could have tested 5 different retention options very, very quickly in maybe 1 or 2 days. And I really believe that that's a lot better solution. And I really suggest that everybody tries as much as they can, as much as I love to code. I mean, I'm a JavaScript developer, but just trying to stay out of the problem space. You know, and when you get stuck in that and you realize, you know, oh crap, I've got this bug, just step out for a second and say, wait a minute, like, what actually am I trying to solve here? And maybe this doesn't matter. Maybe I can just throw this away and we can just do it another way. Another thing is to keep it simple. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but the other thing I see as a major mistake in these young startups is that they over-architect, they over-engineer, and they under-deliver. So it kind of works with what I was saying before, that if you have lots of small units of work, and you work on them, you get them out to market, you can use something like A/B testing to test them in the market, see if the users like it, see if it's fulfilling the goals of the business problem, and then iterate on it. You know, don't set out to say, hey, we're 90% sure that this is going to be exactly what we have to do. Just do a lot of small things. Keep them simple. Keep them moving. Momentum is magic. You know, just keep it going. The other thing in a startup, which is a bit unusual, I mean, in a large organization, and a lot of guys here tonight have talked about scalability and how at a big scale, like Facebook scale, it's really important the way that you engineer your products and the tools that you use. In a startup environment, it's much more important to focus on flexibility. So if you're faced with a problem, I'll give you a good example of this. So I used to work on a code base a while back, and it was a legacy code base which we inherited. And it was using Active Record, and this is in PHP. It's in PHP. And what happened was that whenever we wanted to make any changes to the domain, we have to make them at the database level. We'd have to write migrations. Then we'd have to commit the new models to the repository. And it was really just epic, basically, to iterate. So I would actually advocate, for instance, using a document store early on in the business instead of using a relational database, just so that you can move quickly, you can make mistakes, you can blow the thing away, you don't have to write migrations, you don't need a schema, you don't have to worry about your schema changing all the time. And it's really important to think about the architecture in the terms of, I'm going to throw this away. This may never be used again. Let's just try it. And not like, hey, let's spend 4 weeks and make the perfect whatever whiz-bang thing that we may never use ever again. And it may actually just be discarded. Okay, there's another tip. So hiring the best people is really, really important. I mentioned before that we went through a very heavy recruitment drive at one of my companies where we scaled up from something like 6 to 20, I think we had 35 people at the end of it. It was about 2 months. And we did think it was a very good thing, and we were being encouraged by the business owner to do this sort of stuff. And nobody really questioned it. We thought it was a good thing. I'd really recommend that you don't hire quickly. It's like scaling. It's like scaling servers. Scaling people is like scaling servers. Don't expect that you can scale overnight. That you can scale up your development force double, triple in just a matter of months. Because what happens is you end up with a whole lot of managerial problems. You end up with a lot of problems with people having conflicting point of view. People are not up to speed on the code base. And when you're really all pushing to get to market early, and you're pushing to try and to really to get the product done, it's really, really difficult to be recruiting at the same time. So most teams, I would recommend, if there's a good saying, if you can't feed your team with 2 pizzas, then your team's too big. And I really believe that's true. So keep that in mind. Leadership clashes is another problem that we had. And again, Dustin mentioned this about Google. Once you get to a certain size, the kind of magic falls out of the relationship. You're no longer this kind of small startup with just some mates that that it was before. You turn into this sort of bureaucratic machine where everybody needs to have meetings, emails, and this sort of stuff. So I guess my advice here would be to split up the teams into being self-contained and self-reliant and letting people have the autonomy to make decisions for themselves. And don't second-guess people. If that's their area of expertise, just leave them to that, even in a very small company. And also empower your staff. So it's like I said before, allow them to make those decisions, allow them to really own the product and be part of the product development, and don't discourage younger or junior staff from not making these big decisions. Alrighty, so just wrapping it up. So aim for success, but plan for failure. If you set out to think that, hey, 60% of what I'm writing here is actually going to be thrown away, it totally changes the way that you think about coding. But again, plan for success. If you do get overnight success, if your Kickstarter campaign kicks off and you do really well, you kind of need to have that in the back of your mind, that you're going to have something, that you're going to be able to cope with that. But at the same time, don't let that dominate your thinking. Don't think that premature optimization will get you anywhere. The second thing is focus on the needs of the business and not necessarily on the engineering. Now, I love technical problems. I'm a game developer, an open source contributor, and I love to write code. But it's all too easy to get stuck in that problem space, in the solution space and not in the problem space. And when you see yourself doing that, it's really important that you try and grab yourself out of it and think about what is the needs of the business. Because if I don't fulfill the needs of the business is going to go under, we're going to run out of money, and everybody's going to be out of work, and nobody's going to be happy. We throw everything away. So always think first about the needs of the business. And the last thing, I guess, is just don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to look like a bit of an idiot or a fool. Don't be afraid to ship code that's not 100% perfect. If you have a very small user base, I'm talking about, if you only have a few thousand people, it's actually all right if you ship something every now and then that's not perfect. And spending 2 more weeks on it, trying to get it pixel perfect, is not going to give you the same rewards. You're getting diminishing returns at that point for that feature. So at that point, you should probably just think, let's ship it, and let's see what it looks like. And if nobody uses it, then no loss. I'm glad we didn't spend the time on it. All right, that's me. Thank you very much.